He's got a couple of slides in the middle of this. So once you pull it up, again, this was preparing wildland firefighters for big events. For those of you who know me, I'm Matthew Carroll, AFMO for North Country Fire Management, based out of Acadia National Park. And I work for Fish and Wildlife Service. The FMO is park, and we have 37 refuges, 13 park facilities that we're fire management over. So that's who I am, and we're here to talk about normal accidents. So, we're taking this idea of normal accidents from a book by Carroll, where he talks about this idea of normal accidents. We'll get into exactly how we're defining that. But just sort of you can groan or applaud or whatever you want. How do you feel about this first slide? Read it and how does it hit you? Ouch?
Yes.
Okay, anything else? Anyone completely disagree with the slide? Any part of it? Got one in the back, good. Okay. This is not a data-driven necessarily, it's not data-heavy. The whole point of this is to start a conversation. So the fact that I'm hoping that we're all not on the same page, that there is some disagreement in the room, and that's kind of the point. But despite organizational improvements and all of the effort we've been putting into trying to reduce firefighter fatality, that trend line, it's hard to see up there, but it's kind of not changed. So the other part is how do we know it's unacceptable? That's the part that I thought would probably make some uncomfortable, maybe, I don't know. But so we know it's unacceptable because the language that we use to talk about fire fatalities and we talk about safety, you know, it's no longer zero fatality, but it kind of hovers around like everyone needs to come home safe, and I don't disagree with that at all, but that's the language we use, so any fatality would be therefore unacceptable. So that's kind of the premise we're basing that off of. So we put a lot of effort into trying to reduce that number, and over time, we have not. It's, you know, we have spikes and valleys, but kind of remain the same. So the question, could wildland firefighter fatalities be considered normal accidents? And how we're defining normal accidents, and how Charles Perrault defined it, and kind of what got us into the idea of normal accidents was a way into this conversation. So normal accidents happen in systems where they're complex and interactively complex. He used many examples, but primarily the one that he launches off in the book with was nuclear power plants. So he's an engineer, he's talking about design systems that they design them to work in a certain way, and yet, because of the complexity of the system, there is interactions that no one predicted would happen. Okay? The other part of it that he says it has to be there for normal accidents to occur is that the system has to be tightly coupled. Okay, and we'll get in. We will get into exactly what we mean by those. So, and the outcome is where multiple unexpected interactions and failures are inevitable. So that again, here now, this goes in. This challenges the idea that zero fatality is an achievable goal, that everyone will always come home safe. And I've been talking to people in the hallways and around, and I think we all struggle with this. No one wants to go to a funeral, no one wants to be killed on the fire line. We don't go out with that intent. But at some level, we all understand there's risk involved. Okay. So this is, again, here we are, multiple unpredictable interactions. And then also, the other part is it has to affect something we value. They talked, when they were talking about risk assessments for wildland fire risk assessments, Here's the other side of that, or the other kind of risk. Same thing, there has to be the probability of something happening, there has to be the consequence, and it has to be affecting something that we value. In this case, it's human life. And that's, Charles Perrault had a little bit broader definition, talking about fatalities, damage to property, or disruption. So, okay, interactive complexity. And do we have that? Right? Is that something that exists in the wildland fire, system, in the wildland fire environment? Okay, so the book goes into a lot more detail, and our understanding of complexity has evolved a little bit from Charles Perrault's original definition, but essentially it's saying that because of the system we've in part designed and the system we inherit when we go out on a wildland fire, we have to expect, if we believe that normal accidents are possible, that we have to expect some unexpected interactions. Okay? Tightly coupled, pretty easy. So in order for errors in certain parts of the system, the way he was describing the way that Lloyd and I were working with it was, you can have component failures, you can have failures all over the system, but it doesn't lead to this major event, okay? And we have that all over the place. Miscommunications, misperceptions, and what he was talking about is in a system that is so loosely coupled that one won't affect the other. You can have all those errors, but in a system where those errors can propagate through the system, combine, that's when these larger incidents happen. Major system failures happen. Okay, again, if it's not that tightly coupled, you won't have that propagation through the system. Okay, multiple unexpected interactions that confounded operators. So as these things were progressing, the operators were unable to decipher what was going on. And this is the Colebrook FLA, and literally this is one of my favorite quotes from an FLA. Crews didn't expect the unexpected and they caught them off guard. Well, that kind of says it all for me. Of course it did, right? It's unexpected. But that's the environment we face. So kind of building the case that, yeah, we do operate in an interactive and complex environment. And we'll go into why we think that's important. So Lloyd's going to come up and talk about a couple of illustrations, not wildland fire, but we're going to tie it back in the end.
Thanks, Matt. Thanks for having me. I want to say, we'll go over the backyard fence and see what neighbors are doing, what other fields are doing, see if there are ideas I can borrow. And in Professor Carroll's book, which we hope you will all read and thoughtfully consider, he had a footnote. After reviews, he's running many categories of accidents. He said, I think artillery-friendly fire incidents have some similarities with some of these other types of normal accidents. And that hit me right here, and I'll show you why in a minute. From that little footnote, I wondered, could it be that we could learn something that would be helpful with firefighter safety from what the Army has learned about dealing with artillery-friendly fire incidents? So we're going to take a little bit of a climb into a time machine here. This is Firebase Normandy, Eastertide 1970, not far away at the division base camp. Bob Hope was making his last show of his last tour to visit the troops and entertain the troops. Well, I'm sitting there in the morning in the fire direction center. There was a tent in the holding ground, and there was a familiar whistle and a very loud explosion. And it killed a young soldier 50 meters from where I was sitting. And we then thought about, isn't it strange we would call it a friendly fire incident? They now call it amicide or non-hostile deaths. They change the names of things to get better euphemisms. And so I thought about, well, is this kind of a tragedy something that resembles firefighter accidents, firefighter fatalities, and try to see if I can interpret it through the lens of normal accidents. And so one of the things that you do, my own experience in the field artillery was fairly broad compared to what normally happens. Worked in the field, worked in firing battery, worked in a battalion, fire direction center, and you don't see a lot of complexity here, not a lot of interactive complexity, but you do see tightly coupled in the sense that if there's an error, let's see, is this my, oops, I should have done that. Where's my,
Right in the middle.
the middle one? Okay. If the target is misidentified, and especially if the observer's location is misidentified, you can do everything else right. If you could have the gun chief check the data, but it's the wrong data, then all of this is tightly coupled, starting with an error here that propagates all the way through the system. There's nobody out here who can check and say, oh, we better check that, we get better fix it. We often have, at any individual point, we can have double and even triple checks. We had a battery exec who used to get up, he would demand to be awakened every night and to watch every fire mission. And they called him Terrible Terry, because he was fierce about all of this, about procedure and about safety. Now, one thing about context is that many of the fire missions were fired at night, often by a crew, half of the members had just been roused from sleep to fire a mission, or not uncommonly fired in the rain, as you can imagine from the terrain where we were. So, all of this is highly decentralized. It's not all happening at one place like an incident command. And as I say, the errors can propagate. Now, my hypothesis was, gee, maybe we can learn something from my time and my experience. They must have been working on this, right? Well, oh, you're right, okay. Turns out that the trend is not at all promising from what I can see. 8% non-hostile deaths in Korea, 19% in Vietnam, 21% in Iraq and Afghanistan. And one of the things this shows you is that better technology, we have so many things that are different from my time when I carried a big radio on my back compared to what they do now. So much better ability to locate people, and yet we're getting worse. Now this is all non-hostile deaths, not just artillery ones, other fields that I know very little about, but clearly this is an example of where the underlying thing is a system problem. It is an inherent characteristic of the complex system and the system that's tightly coupled. It's not something that can be handled, by just fixing one little thing at one little point. My disappointment with this was that I tried to I'm an alumnus of the Field Artillery School. I tried to call their Lessons Learned Center. Can you show me some stuff about what's being done? I never got anywhere. I guess if my record was like that, I wouldn't want to show it either. So perhaps, in a way, I'm wasting time here because they didn't have any really useful results to show. Right while Matt and I were just beginning together, I think for this, we had 2 destroyers on the Pacific Ocean collide with merchant ships. And we're thinking, how can this happen? My father-in-law was an officer on a destroyer. He was incredulous. He couldn't understand it. And ship collisions might be a very good analogy to firefighter fatalities. And if you think through it, and especially if you read Carroll's chapter about ship collisions, there may be something there. But it shows that, again, the technology cannot drive collisions to zero. It doesn't seem to even be getting close. And you probably want to look at the Navy's official reports, some of which are on the web now, of these 2 destroyer accidents. One of the things that's very clear is operation tempo, exhaustion. These ships had sailors working 100 hours a week, week after week after week. The cumulative factor of fatigue had to be significant, there's no question about it. And naval officers commenting on all this would say, these are system problems. These are not something that can be fixed by canning a destroyer's command or an exec. So these analogies, I think, have a lot of use, and there are some things, even though I didn't learn anything about the artillery side of it, there are some things that are some of the things that Matt had me reading that I think fire managers ought to think about. Thank you much.
Okay, so now I'm going to go wildland fire. That was what Lloyd talked about. He just didn't show you the slide about the destroyers. So now the question is what can we? Going back to the original question, could we say that wildland fire fatalities are a product of normal accidents, or another way we could say this is system accidents, accidents or errors that are inherent in the system. Okay, so we have, when we operate in the wildland fire environment, right? We have individuals, we go out as individuals, whether a part of a crew or just out there, and we have our internal system, right? Whether we had coffee or didn't have coffee, etc. Right? We operate in teams. There's another system on top of the individual environment. There's a technical aspect. There's all of the technology that surrounds us, from radios to phones to GPSs and GIS and weather and all that other stuff. That's entirely, it's another system on top of that. And then on top of that, you have, so it's hard to read, sorry about that, political social systems. All of the policy that we are operating within. Is there a chance within all of those systems and the interaction of all of those systems that there could be unintended or unpredictable interactions? Okay? So, in an effort to get a handle on all of these, we do a lot of stuff, right? We have language, we throw technology at it, with L-series, you know, we throw classes, training, right? And yet, here's the same graph, but it's normalized for acres. So this is fatalities per acre. And yet, it's kind of flat. We have not changed anything. So the question is, if I can get you to nod in the room that says, yeah, these are normal accidents, what then, right? What if these accidents are system accidents and not the result of bad people or failure of individual components? So then, what if they are? Then we have to admit that accidents are more than operator and equipment error. Sometimes that's hard to get on, because that's the first place you look. James Reason's holes in the Swiss cheese. It's the first slice of Swiss cheese that you come to. When something goes bad, we look at the operator. We look at the component that failed. But if we stop there, we lose the ability to learn all the stuff about the system. Okay? And accidents are more than just a single cause. There is, in a complex system, there's multiple avenues for complex interactions to happen. Oops, sorry. We should expect, if we agree that that normal accidents are possible, we have to expect unanticipated system interactions. We have to expect that. We have to design a system that can deal with that. We have to operate knowing that we're going to be surprised. Okay, importantly, this is not a, well, it's going to happen, so what is there to be done? Because it's easy to say, well, it's going to happen, well, oh well. I'm willing to throw 10 firefighters a year at this and we're okay with it. It is, I think, a call to redefine success, because just talking about outcome is probably a pretty poor indicator, or not a poor indicator, I would say a coarse indicator of success. I think there's more that we can look at beyond just the outcome that will help us improve in this complicated or complex system. And I think most importantly, it's called to do something different, not the same thing better. I think that slide that I had up, that all those things popped up, it's a lot of the same stuff, and I'll show you what I mean by that. And what does it mean to do something different now? So something different. Great example, Brent, it was, who was the keynote, Brian, or Dave Cooper, sorry. Dave Cooper came in and talks about what it means to be a good SEAL, right? I think his speech was about how to be a better actor in the system, how to be a good SEAL. He was talking about that circle. I think what we miss a lot is this system circle. If we only subscribe to the better actor circle, then any fatality is going to be traced back to, we need more training, we need to improve the actor. We need to improve the people in the system to outperform the system. But if we believe that accidents or errors are inherently going to happen in the system, we're not going to outperform the system. So we have to find ways to do something differently and find tools that work in a system that's going to deliver unexpected stuff. How do we design, how do we find tools for our actors to operate in a system that's going to surprise them? And then finally, this definition of success. How do we change the definition of success? Because we're going to put emphasis in areas that will lead us to success. So if we change the definition of success to include more than just an outcome, then hopefully we can provide the tools needed to achieve those outcomes. Okay, so what, in my work, I worked for the last 4 years doing fatality investigations before I took this job with the U.S. Forest Service and organizational learning and human performance and stuff like that. So this is where a lot of this information comes from my work there. And this is based on complexity science. How do we manage amidst complexity? And it's a capacity for sense-making, learning, improvisation, and adaptation. It looks like things more like, instead of building a better person, it's how do we have people interact better? How do we help people build relationships so that as they're trying to negotiate what acceptable risk is, when we are negotiating with, I'm a division supervisor, negotiating with a hot truck crew or another crew, how do we have the best conversation to negotiate what acceptable risk is to us today? And then how do we make sure that we build a relationship so that we can have that tomorrow? Or 20 minutes from now when things change. Therefore, when we get surprised, when things change, we are able to come back to the table and renegotiate. And I think it's slight shifts in how we perceive the system will help us apply the right tools. And more of the same, I think, could potentially push us further down a road that doesn't line up with the system we're operating. Any questions? Do we have time for one question or any clarifying questions? Okay, and then you wanted to talk about this last slide.
This is a little phrase that I found in a book that was written about military disasters, follow-ups, friendly fire incidents. Apparently they've been around a long time, since the ancient Greeks. And in his conclusion, he says something I think will resonate with firefighters. In the final analysis, and he wrote this when men and women were not very noticeable in fire crews or in the armed forces. In the final analysis, it is men who make mistakes through the stress that war imposes. This stress is fundamentally linked with fear on their part. Fear of death and mutilation, and fear of failure and humiliation. Mistakes will be reduced when men have less to fear, but then that would not be war, and they would not be men. Thanks for your attention.